Hello?
He's still getting it straightened out. I'm going to let mine come up.
Okay, so we have the live stream going. At this point, we will begin the introductions. Who would like to start us off?
He's pointing at me. Okay. Roshan, you cut me. You're up.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for Margaret for putting this on. Rod helped get this together, so thank you to Rod Miller. Thank you for everyone coming here and participating in this tonight. It's a really great turnout. I know that we're all excited about that, so I just want to say appreciation to all of you for coming and for having us here and allowing us this opportunity to present our platforms and giving you a chance to get to know us. I'm Travis Helm. I'm running for U.S. House of Representatives, represent the Democratic Party, to run against Ms. Liz Cheney. I grew up in Rollins. I was born and raised on the Red Desert, pulling calves in spring snowstorms. And then I went on to University of Wyoming, where I got my undergrad degree and did a master's program before going on to law school. Finished law school and started my own law office, where I practice immigration law. And so my first couple of years as an attorney, you know, I identified myself as an attorney and called myself an attorney, especially over these last this last year and a half. I've found myself protecting families that, you know, these are Wyoming families. And, you know, when we hear about an illegal immigrants getting deported, we're also talking about a Wyoming resident, oftentimes who is married to a U.S. citizen, Wyoming resident with citizen children. And so these are Wyoming families. And so I found myself on this mission that I didn't know that I was going on, of protecting Wyoming families. And so I got my hands full with that, as you can all imagine, as we know what's going on in the immigration world. And a group of Democrats came to me and asked me if I would consider running for U.S. House of Representatives, because we need someone who is involved in this fight and is active and is knowledgeable about these issues. And so I gave it some thought and consulted with my son, and we decided to step up, and we want to represent all Wyoming families. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm running as a Democrat, but I'm looking to represent all of Wyoming. You know, my family is mostly Republicans. I have to represent them too. I want them to be proud of me. It takes a lot of guts to run as a Democrat in Wyoming. So in a Democrat running, got to give them at least a little bit of credit just for stepping up and doing that. Thank you. And so I want to represent the Democratic Party, and I want to represent all of Wyoming because I care about all of Wyoming. And when I see our community suffering, we all suffer. And so we all need to come together, set aside the parties, and vote for Wyoming. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Rod Miller. I'm also a candidate for the United States House of Representatives. I grew up in Carbon County. My family has been here for a long, long time. We were talking about this as meeting at Willie's house. My great-grandfather was the sheriff in Rollins when Big Nose George was lynched. So my family's always been pretty tough on crime. Grew up in the northern part of Carbon County, the really pretty part, the densest concentration of rattlesnakes on the planet. But it's fun to be here. Thanks so much to Margaret for putting this on. The campaign has been, yeah. So I think we're going to be fielding questions from y'all throughout the evening. So I'm not going to do a lot of speechifying now, but I will tell you that regardless of the hot button issues on the table right now, where can you carry your gun? Who has to bake a cake for who? Who gets to use which bathroom? Those kinds of things that make everybody sweat and slobber when they're talked about on television. My preference would be to put all those off to the side of the table, deal with them at the appropriate time, and focus on what I think is the primary problem that the United States has right now, and in fact the greatest threat to our country, which is $21 trillion in red ink on our balance sheet. With sovereign debt like that, we have no other more important job to do than deal with it. If we don't, in a couple of budget cycles, the interest alone on our national debt will be $1 trillion. And that's $1 trillion that we will not have to spend on a strong defense, healthy kids, good infrastructure whatsoever. So I will just throw that out there, and I hope somewhere during the evening someone raises their hand and says, Miller, what do you think about that deficit? So let's have at it. Thank you all for coming.
Hello, I'm Greg Hunter, and I too am running for Democrat for House. So my primary opponent is Travis. I am going against counsel of everything I've been told. Everybody has a migration story, whether you're fifth generation or you just came here several years ago. So everybody thinks they're born where they're supposed to be, but I think I was supposed to be born in Wyoming. I grew up playing in the creek. I grew up wanting to be outdoors. I grew up doing those things. I didn't really realize I grew up doing those things because I couldn't actually see. That baseball hit me in the face too many times, and I decided that baseball wasn't my thing. So the creek was my solace, and I caught a lot of things and grew up to be those things. Public school saved my life. I love public school. I'll just tell you, I thought I had one less rib for a little while. So those things we shouldn't be doing in schools these days. So again, I know that's a funny thing, but it's not a funny thing. I still talk to people that think these things. So again, we need to address those issues. Because of theology, I chose geology. I became a geologist and graduated, unfortunately, in 1986, right when there was a bust. So just like Wyoming has to diversify its dreams, I had to diversify my dreams. Some of my peers, however, they continued on and got the advanced degrees, and they are now rolling it up in Houston. So I do have a lot of connections to the oil business down in Houston, and I understand that particular business, which is a big deal for Wyoming, energy being our one thing. One of the major things that we need to do revenue for, so that is once I became a geologist, environmental business, I helped clean up all the things that we've and these things are still going on. There's still being releases, there's still things to be cleaned up. I work for every federal agency that you name the 3-letter acronym, I work for them all. And that's the reason I feel like I can work as a congressman. I understand the federal process. Everybody says, why didn't you start out as dog catcher? I'm not here any length of time. I can live anywhere I want because I do all work federal. So I understand how the things work, and I want to help Wyoming understand how those things work and unshackle the issues to make sure that we get the stuff we need for Wyoming. Tourism, agriculture, energy. I can help negotiate those things and make sure the government is more efficient in delivering those services so the state can address the public education issues and all the things that Wyoming needs to address. Thank you very much. I look for your vote on August 21st.
So we'll do, now that you've done the introductions, we'll go ahead and do a question and answer section. Anyone who would like to ask a question, please come up here. We have a remote or a remote mic. Or if you would rather me ask the question, I believe there might be some pieces of paper around You can write it down and I will ask it for you.
See? If it was Facebook, we would get a lot of questions. I'm going to tell you that right now. Is there anything?
Okay, going back to Mr. Allen, the immigration issue, the denaturalization process that they're starting, how is that supposed to work?
It's frightening. It's really not supposed to be happening except for in very extreme situations. As an immigration attorney, that's something that I've never dealt with, or we really never saw until just within this last year and a half. Someone can be denaturalized if you find that they had committed fraud in getting their original visa or committed fraud somewhere in the process of applying for their visa. Generally there would have to be some material misrepresentations, kind of getting into the legal jargon, but generally would have to be some sort of material fraud or misrepresentation to get to cause someone to be denaturalized. It certainly seems to, it hasn't been something that's been a problem or something that ever was raised as a political issue, that we have a lot of naturalized people who shouldn't be naturalized. So where this came from and why there is now a denaturalization task force, it seems to have created a solution for something that wasn't a problem, and has actually created a lot of problems for American families. Because even if whoever this person who's being denaturalized is, they are a U.S. citizen. They earned their U.S. citizenship in whatever way they had, be that through employment or through military service or through family relation. So, they already go through a strict vetting process to get first lawful permanent residence, and then, 3 to 5 years later, they become eligible for citizenship. So the fact that we've created a task force, like I say, we've created a task force for a solution that was, creating a solution that wasn't a problem, and now this is going to be ripping families apart and ripping American families apart, hurting our economies, hurting our jobs, hurting the sanctity of our families and the sanctity of our marriages. So I'll
you got a minute left, so.
Yeah, that's enough to say.
There's 2 minutes. Oh, right.
Yeah, it was 2.
I apologize, I forgot to reset my timer.
Can we answer that question too?
The question's up for anybody else to answer if they'd like to.
Yeah, I'm not really happy about the denaturalization process. Congress does set the rules for when you become an American citizen. And so once we set those rules, again, that's what everybody says, they scream the rule of law. Again, if you're screaming the rule of law and doing inhumane things in the name of the rule of law, that's inhumane, and we should not do that. So once you start down the denaturalization process and the way the country is polarized, I worry the next thing people might do is start looking at whether you're a registered Republican or Democrat and start claiming that you'll be denaturalized. So I kind of fear these kinds of things. If you read the Constitution back there, Mr. Hicks brought it, it says nothing about parties. It says we're Americans, and that's what we should be first and foremost. So there's not a Democrat, there's not a Republican, we're Americans first. And so when we start down the denaturalization process, that is a really bad road. And so when people say it can't happen here, it appears that it could happen here. So that's what I'm going to say. And I'll make sure that that does not happen. Because as Travis said earlier, standing up and being a Democrat in Wyoming, you should come to my Facebook page. It's really good. But I do try to address these issues, because unless you address them, unless we, sunshine disinfects these kinds of things, that's what we're here for. So thanks a lot.
Liz, you got anything to say on that?
I am certainly not going to take issue with Travis Helm's legal knowledge of the immigration system. He's the guy who knows what he's talking about, and listen to him on stuff like denaturalization. What I will say is that Congress, in fact, does not set the rules for immigration and border control right now. They should. It is in the Constitution that is their responsibility to control our country's borders and also to exercise the country's war-making powers and also to administer and regulate our international commerce. All of those responsibilities and more over the past few decades, Congress has shifted to the president, punted on their responsibilities under Article 1 of the Constitution, and said, we'll let a strong executive take care of that. And a president is never going to be reluctant to acquire power from Congress. That's the balance of power, the separation of power struggle that is set up in the Constitution, and it's an incredibly creative and wonderful thing, and it keeps us safe. What Congress needs to do is to reassert themselves in those areas of war-making, border control, and international trade, and live up to their responsibilities in the Constitution, and hash out things like denaturalization, whether families stay together, all those issues that are so divisive right now because a president proposed them. Congress needs to take that back into their own control and deal with them in a bipartisan committee. So, end of sermon.
Okay, so we'll let Chia go, and then I got some written questions that I will ask once Chia's done.
I'm just, and this is for y'all, is that how do you get back to your own backyard, just your own self, taking care of your own block and your little town, then your county? I mean, when do we focus on that as opposed to everyone else? Not in this country. Is that a question? So how is it that you get back to just focusing on local stuff? And thank you.
The Constitution of the United States does not place responsibility on Congress to administer at the state, county, or local level. Those responsibilities are they'll be talked about with some of the legislative candidates that are going to come up here later. So Congress really has no authority in your zoning decisions. You know, what hours you can water. Those are local, and they should stay local. When the country was being put together, the founding fathers looked upon the individual states not just as units of the United States. Thomas Jefferson called them the laboratories of democracy, where things that aren't dealt with at the federal level can be dealt with among the states, and they can derive a solution to a problem that is unique to that location that Congress simply does not have the ability to do. So as a member of Congress, if I'm elected as a member of Congress, I will focus on those responsibilities that are mine under the Constitution of the United States and trust the states to do the things that are best for them.
Running for national office, but this is all extremely local to me because I want to represent the people of Wyoming, the people of these communities. You know, I remember my first bust. I was in, economic bust. I was in 4th grade, and all my friends moved away. I didn't realize it was an economic bust at the time. I just remember that all my friends moved away, and I was extremely sad. Then we graduated from college, and I lost half of my friends again because there weren't jobs in our local communities. And so, we were raised up and told, go to college and get a good education so you could get a good job. And then we were faithful children, and we go to college and we get that education to get a good job, and then we're exiled out of the state. I
one of the main reasons why I started why I went to law school and why I started my own practice is because I wanted to live in Wyoming. And so I made a way that I could stay here. And so one thing we need to encourage thought within our local communities of finding ways that we can stay, but also, as a federal legislator, I can do things to try to protect our economy so that our local economy is not going through boom and bust. Because I love county fairs. I grew up doing 4-H, and I love that, and I want that to be able to last. And my friends are the people who make up Wyoming communities. They work at the Sinclair Oil Refinery. They work out on the rigs. They work at the prison. They work, in all these jobs. So it's all local to me. I'm not doing it for any reason other than just local. So it's all politics is local. Thank you. Well, I have to kind of reiterate what Rod said. We are federal congressmen, but that's what we're going after. But it does affect you locally. The idea that states are, doing their own democracy is kind of an interesting thing when the federal authorities almost blackmail the states into complying with issues. You may agree with some of those and you may not. 0.08 is the federal level, at which if your state doesn't set that for drinking and driving, you will not get federal funds. So they semi-blackmail you into these control things. So as a federal, I would like to open it up more for somehow laboratories more of democracy, as Rod indicated. We're looking at some states that have defied federal authority and legalize marijuana, which is a federal scheduled drug. It makes absolute no sense to me. Again, a state that or a group that wants free market almost in everything else, and then all of a sudden we get to this particular thing, and we don't want free market. So I don't understand those things. In the last 30 years, when I grew up, we were demonizing cocaine and heroin. In the last 30 years, the pill people have pressed it into white pills and handed it out like crazy. Again, we need to address things state level so we can address to see what works for Wyoming and then what works for local people. And we need to really take back that control. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Rod, would you like to respond to any of that?
Oh, I started out.
Okay. All right, sounds good.
Just answer the question.
We're having fun playing this by ear.
What do you think with you in Virginia?
Just saying no.
Okay, so beginning with the written questions we've been receiving, and then we'll turn it over to one of our audience members. One question, what is your stance on death with dignity? And this is open to anyone to answer.
Very interesting question. You have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I think about my death and how that would occur. And, I'm not afraid of death. I'm just afraid of the process of death. I've watched people die in absolute agony on my mom's couch, both my grandmother and my father. So, and have I known more then than I do now? I would have taken steps to help them out because it was a terrible, terrible thing to watch. So when it comes to my particular demise, if I received some issue that I felt like was something I didn't want to, and as they say, the process of going through it will make you whatever in the next life. Sorry, it's this life. So I would want to choose how I end my life. And I think people should be able to do that. I talk about it now. I say that I want those, turkey vultures that roost outside of Old Main at University of Wyoming to, eat me up at Vitavue and then circle around Old Main. So I would have that choice. I personally don't want to face that choice, But if I do, I would like to be able to take that choice myself. I also don't want, though, people that have mental issues to choose it too quickly. So there should be some process in there that we adjudicate, and I don't know what that is. So I need help in explaining these things, but I do believe you have the right to decide when it's time for you to go. Thank you very much.
Both the United States and the Wyoming constitutions are very specific about our individual freedoms, and I believe it is an article of faith in a democracy like ours that we as individual human beings, be we man or woman, have absolute, complete, unquestioned autonomy over our own lives, that nobody at any level of government can tell us what to do. And that freedom extends to the point where we do something to harm another person. But in our own lives, we should have absolute agency. And I claim that for me. So, having said that, there are a lot of moral gray areas around that death with dignity, right to life, sort of how we live our lives question. That may be fodder for questions this evening, but let me say right now, you as a human being, a resident of Wyoming and the United States, have absolute and complete autonomy over your own being, according to your state and national constitution.
Agree with both these gentlemen on this point. That part seems, fairly simple, that we should all have control of our bodies and what we do with our bodies, and to choose to be able to die gracefully and with dignity. The real sticky point, the real issue here is not someone deciding and ending their own life, but employing a doctor or some company to do that. Even if we all agree that people should be able to die with dignity, how do we set our laws up? How do we be good legislators to make what would now be committed, be considered murder? How do we make our laws comport with what we seem to, be in basic agreement with on that? As a lawmaker, I think I would definitely want to be consulting with medical professionals on that, and with groups of people who have had to deal with that as a family. And I would listen to those, to the experts, the families who are experts in having to have gone through those situations, and I would listen to the medical experts, and I would try to find a way to build an appropriate legal framework so that we could all have what we seem to agree is a right to die with dignity.
Okay, so here's our second hot button issue so far. What is your solution for healthcare? Repeal, replace, or fix Obamacare? And this is open to anyone.
I'll take it. Healthcare. Well, we can go back just to what we just talked about a second ago. If you're at 20 respirations a minute, they won't give you any more liquid morphine, because anything less than 20, that means the doctor's participating in your suicide. So when you go to all these things about medical, it's a very complex subject. It's very obviously, we have the buying power to drive down all kinds of costs if we chose to do it. If you watch TV, all you see is insurance firms and white pill firms. So you know who's making the money. We really do have to constrict those firms and drive down their costs. Again, everybody will scream death panels. As baby boomers get older, everybody wants to live forever. So it's a really hard thing to constrain on these things, medical costs. So it's a tricky issue, but we definitely need to constrain the cost by using our leverage every other country that does these things of universal health care have a lot less cost for a lot more impact. We pay tons, and we make people absolutely filthy wealthy. A great deal of my friends hop pills for the pharmaceutical industry. So those kinds of things have to be constrained. I don't know what your question is, but
I've got about 15 seconds. The question was replace.
Repeal or replace Obamacare.
we got to repair it. We got to repair it. And I've heard the replace thing. Trump was going to give us the best health care you could ever get. He controls the Republican legislature. What do we get? Costs are going up.
So replace or fix? We were promised that the Republican Party had some replacement that would have allowed for a repeal. And I think that there was support for repeal, but there was no replacement to give anyone an option of, okay, let's replace with that. My experience with healthcare has been shaped by my time I spent as an exchange student in Denmark. And I witnessed a particular kind of freedom while I was living in Denmark in their cradle to the grave healthcare system. I witnessed a freedom of people not living with the fear that their next medical emergency could mean bankruptcy for them and their families. And there's a true freedom in that. So far as do we repeal or do we fix, I'm not really an ideologue. I want to find the best program, the best solution for our country. I would be, thank you, I would be willing to replace with a socialized welfare system, a socialized Medicare for all system. It actually costs less. If you look at the countries that are doing it, they're spending around 7% of their GDP, where we're spending like 15 to 17%. So that's like $1 trillion of our GDP that we could be saving each year. So we could be saving by going for Medicare for all. But I would get on board with anything that gives us more affordable health care. So I'm not stuck on having to have universal health care. I would get on board with anything, regulating insurance companies, anything that lets us have affordable health care, because we need that to be able to live here in Wyoming.
Yeah, no argument with what these gentlemen have said, but I might point out that for about 50 years, the nation has been operating under the paradigm that if we do an omnibus health care bill, like Johnson did or tried to do in the mid-60s and Hillary Clinton tried to do in 1990, if we try and solve all of the health care problems in the United States with one omnibus bill and expect that bill to pass, we are naive. Every time that's been tried in our history, it has fallen flat on its face. If instead what we do is look at what is making healthcare so expensive today, the cost of medications, if we can open our borders to generic equivalents from other countries that cost less than one made by Big Pharma, we're taking a step toward making medicine cheaper.
1 minute, Rob.
And insurance is only one component of the healthcare question. The cost of medicines, as I indicated, and the cost of a stay in the hospital or doctor's costs. If you have to go to the emergency room or to ICU, it can bankrupt you, and that should not happen. So, and we need to keep in mind that the healthcare industry is not in the business of keeping Americans healthy. They are in the business of making money.
Thank you, gentlemen. We have a member of the audience who's been waiting patiently, so I will let her ask a question and then go back to yes.
These questions have been kind of specific. I would like to be a little more general. I got a good idea or somewhat of an idea in your introduction about things that you are most focused on. But if you represent us in Washington, D.C., what is the biggest problem that you see? And Rod kind of made it clear to me when he spoke, but if you could name one problem that you see and tell us what your solution would be for that problem, what would that be?
Well, when I started this campaign, I identified all the issues that I thought were important and went around the state speaking some, but trying to listen more. And so then I've been able to reassess what the truly important issues are. I identified healthcare as the most important issue. And I still believe that it's the most important tangible issue. It's something that we all touch and feel in some way, and we know that we need healthcare. But if you look at the Affordable Health Care Act, Obamacare, and look at basically every piece of legislation that gets done on the federal level, the problem is money in politics. And until we get big money in politics, we've got to get big money out of politics, because any good idea will be perverted by the influence of the money. So the solution is, as proposed by the Wyoming Promise Organization, a 28th Amendment to the United States Constitution that says that corporations are not money, or corporations are not people, and money is not a form of speech. If we pass that 28th Amendment, then that gives us a container and a new reality in which we can enact further campaign finance reform. But that to me, that is what I've gone around and listened to the people of Wyoming. The Wyoming Promise Organization is circulating their petition to get money out of politics. It has more Republican signatures than it has Democrat signatures. This is a full spectrum issue. It's something that we all agree on. It's something that we can all get on, and it's something that I want to champion. I champion the 28th Amendment. Okay. Every 2 years, we can send 435 new people to Congress. Every year, we send these same people. It's really kind of up to us to change the divisiveness in Washington by sending other people than this kind of person. Okay? If you want money out of politics, this is big money in big politics. So I agree that we need to get money out of politics, and that corporations aren't people. For some reason, they tell me that unions can't take money and advocate for candidates, but corporations can make money off my back and argue against my interests much louder than I can. So that's not right. So if you want to really change things, send new people to Congress, send 2 people and they'll claim, oh, we can't get the big appointments. We can't be on the Armed Services Committee. We can't bring home the bacon to you. That is BS. They want to keep their seat. Look, send somebody new, things will change. That's what you have to do. I agree getting money out of politics. I agree with the 28th Amendment. That's a fantastic idea. But send new blood and get rid of those people up there. People like this.
And I'm not going to argue with these men. I'm still going to maintain that the biggest threat to our country is our $21 trillion sovereign debt. But we have problems that we're going to have to overcome reducing that debt. And those are the belligerent attitude in Congress across party lines, where elected representatives are there more to be cheerleaders and hitmen for the leadership of their political party. And both parties are equally guilty of this. I'm not accusing any particular party. It has just gotten to the point where the parties have staked out the extreme ends of the question, and they're fighting to the death from that position. How do we overcome that? I hearken back to Nick Longworth when he was Speaker of the House between the Depression and World War II. He and Cactus Jack Garner, the Democrat leader of the House, drove to work each day together, talked about what they needed to do in the House. If we get to that point in our Congress, and I think we can, with possibly 100 new faces, freshmen coming into the U.S. House after this election, I think we can reach those 100 people before the party hacks and the bosses get to them, and rent out a big hall in D.C., room enough to dance, get some beer and pizza, and hire Patty Fiasco to come play, and get to know each other as human beings before we have to step onto the floor and do our job. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
Hey, Margaret, is 8 o'clock your absolute cutoff time for this? All right, because the questions are stacking up.
I would like to hear your opinion on term limits and what you feel about maybe taking the representatives to a 4-year term so that you're not having elections every 2 years and you're concentrating more on your elections than you are on the business in Washington. And then term limits, but for both the Senate and the House.
I just stated earlier that you can send 435 new people to Congress every 2 years. Absolutely, I love the Constitution. I know that the Electoral College is really kind of funky, but I wish it would go back to the original intent. The original intent was that you were never supposed to vote for your president, okay? The only 3 electoral votes you had were your vote for your governor and your vote for your congressman. I know this is getting down in the weeds, but your governor got 1 shot at a senator in his term, his or her term, and your congressman, obviously the first 2 years didn't get a shot at the presidency, but they all came together and picked the president. Let me just tell you, if your congressmen and your senators pick terrible presidents, you would get them out of there. We would be focusing more on those people, the governor and the congressman, instead of now we have really kind of too much democracy, a lot of time that we need. So the original intent was the idea. So to think that the people that get elected year after year, that stay up there year after year, then are going to agree to term limits, that is not going to happen. That is not going to happen. It's our responsibility to get rid of people. I put her on the ground again, like this. So, you can get rid of her this time. You can get rid of her. Rod, myself, or Travis, you can do it. And it'll change things.
The 2-year term for U.S. Congressman is constitutional, Article 2, so you have to change that section of the Constitution to increase U.S. House members' term from 2 to 4 years. I'm ambivalent about that. When it comes to term limits, I will term limit myself. I've announced it a couple of 3 times. If I get elected, I'm going to serve 1 term and 1 term only, and do as much damage, break as many dishes, scare as many kids, kick as many sacred cows as I can, and then come back to Wyoming, because I don't want to spend that much time away from Wyoming. I used to go back to D.C. 2 or 3 or 4 times a year when I worked for the governor. And I would stay in the Phoenix Park Hotel right down by Union Station, a couple of blocks from the Capitol, and I ran out of Copenhagen one time. In a panic, I was hunting around D.C. for some place that sold Copenhagen. And the closest Copenhagen I could find was 8 metro stops away from my hotel, way out in Crystal City, and it was 2 years old. I'm not gonna stay there more than 2 years. I'm sorry.
We all love Rod. Well, I kind of understand the sentiment. I definitely, well, so first, I support term limits. I would vote in favor of that. I do definitely support that. You know, we think the election cycle just gets to be so much as a voter, and it sounds nice to like have less elections and less commercials and less people asking for your votes and all of that. But I feel like we really need that, and we need that civic engagement. And you know, I did a master's program in history, and look back to the politics and town halls. Like this used to be like the main form of engagement and socializing. And I mean, this is great. I'm like so happy to be a part of this, and really excited for you all to be here. So, thank you. So, well, I would support term limits, probably maybe 3 terms for a representative, 2 terms for a senator. If we don't get money out of politics, it's still going to be the same. We're just going to be turning over more rich people, and so we'll have new rich faces. But as I've found, and as we look at our lawmakers, they're generally near retirement and have a good amount of money. And if we don't change our political finance system, we're going to keep having that same thing. So we might get a bunch of new faces because we have shorter terms, but we're going to have the same basic type of person representing us, demographic. And I see that really, whether it be Republican or Democrat. When I was asked to run, they discussed the fact to me that you need to be able to take 6 months off of your job and raise about $1 million. Well, I don't know how many people can do that. I'm going for this anyways. So.
Yeah. What do you all see as the primary threat from our somewhat resident and absent incumbent to the state of Wyoming voting to do differently?
Well, I can grab a cigarette.
Oh, I'll handle that one. I believe that Representative Cheney's almost slavish adherence to this administration's policy toward the environment and public lands is in fact probably an example of how not to represent the state of Wyoming. When she supports folks like Senator Lee from Utah, who just introduced the bill to transfer our federal lands from federal to state ownership, BLM and Forest Service. That is idiocy. Number one, in Wyoming, it's illegal. Our Constitution says in 2 places that can't happen. In one place, we say we forswear forever any claim to any federal land. In another place, it says if the federal government donates land to the state of Wyoming, we immediately have to offer it at auction to the highest bidder. So,
1 minute, Rod.
Pardon me?
1 minute.
1 minute? Okay. That to me is, and maybe it's because of how I grew up. That hits a little closer to home to me. But that, pardon my use of the vernacular, that pisses me off to have a representative from Wyoming behave like that in Congress toward what is our heritage, our public lands in Wyoming.
She's going to be a sycophant to whatever Washington wants. So she's bad on every level. But I'm going to go with Rod here on the public lands. Where I came from is not a hotbed of public lands. I do primarily public lands work now. It is not lucrative, but I love America. It is a beautiful place. And to think that we're going to take our public heritage that really no other country has and just give it away without any consideration about what we're doing to it is absolutely a crime. A terrible, terrible crime. Again, if you look around, we are basically destroying the world to do what we do. And to think that we don't need biodiversity, to think that we don't need all these lands connected because fire and animals don't recognize these issues is a terrible idea. Right now, we have, 52% of the land in Wyoming is Wyoming, and somehow we can't keep that budget together. So what are we going to do with when we get the other 48? You know what we're going to do to it. We're going to exploit it, sell it, and destroy it. And that's what we can't do. So I don't know why they continue to propose these things when we get the benefit that the other, whoever lives out in the East doesn't. It's a fantastic heritage. We love it, you love it, and why not keep it? So I don't understand what these people are proposing. They all get together and say, oh, well, she wants heli-skiing, and we're going to get the wilderness study areas. Well, Montana's doing the same thing. They just picked a different subject. So a lot of money is coming in to take our lands. That's the truth of it. And she's part of it, and it has to go.
Connections and caring about Wyoming is what will make better legislators. That Liz Cheney has really no connections, and I'm going to say no real caring about the communities of Wyoming. She was happy to buy a house in Jackson so that she could run for office and take a Wyoming job. I mean, as an immigration attorney, I would say that she crossed the border to take a job from someone. But it's connections and caring about Wyoming and about Wyoming communities that are going to make better legislators, because I understand the use of public lands because I grew up on a ranch. I've been lucky that I had lots of places that I could go and roam around and hunt and those things. But most of my friends don't have that privilege. They weren't born with that privilege.
1 minute, Travis.
And so I understand that public lands are where we take our families to go hunting and fishing. And so that's why I care about public lands. I care about the environment. I care about these things. I care about public lands because my friends take their sons and their daughters out there hunting. And I care about the community, and I care about healthcare because I come from Rollins, and I know that our hospital there is always in danger of closing down. I mean, that's a significant problem for the people of Rollins, of Carbon County. But also, this is the most dangerous stretch of interstate during the winter, and we're going to not have a hospital for 250 miles? I mean, I care about these communities, and that's why I would be a better representative than Liz Cheney.
Okay, so we're now at 7:30. We're kind of running out of time. I would like to get the start going on to our state representatives and senators. Mr. Miller, Mr. Helm, Mr. Hunter, I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will start with our state senators. The people running for District 11 are Larry Hicks and Leanne Stevenson.
Thank you for the setup.
Thank you, Margaret, for having us here today. It's wonderful that we have so many people that are so interested in politics that are going on in our district, in our area. I'm Leanne Stevenson. I'm running for Senate District 11. I know many of you. You probably know a little about me. I half own the Lazy Acres with my husband of 36 years. I moved here about 11 years ago, but I've lived in Wyoming for 41 years. I came to Wyoming in 1977. I moved to live in Cheyenne in 1977, a young wife with a small child, and soon found myself homeless and with a small child. I started college in 1973, and then I graduated in 1989. My dad said I was a slow learner. My degree is in administration of justice, and I was a product of many of those LifeNet services. And I want to tell you that I represent the people that really make a difference and make those programs make a difference for, as you can see, quite successful today. I worked in administration of justice. Administration of justice was my major. I worked at the child abuse investigation at DFS. Then I went to the state office and worked in statewide policies, procedures, and training. And the first day on my job at the state office, my boss asked me what I'd like to do. And I said, well, I'd like to be a program manager, and I'd like to work and make legislation to help families and children. And he said, well, great, and took me right over to the legislature, and we worked on legislation from the first day that I was at the state office. It was during welfare reform, so it was a great deal. And I went to the Attorney General's office. I was a program manager for domestic violence. And in working at the state level jobs, I learned that Cheyenne doesn't have the solution to how we solve problems in our rural communities. There are many, many different roads to the same end, and I would like to be your senator from the most rural district in the lower 48 states. I'm willing to go to all the communities and represent their ideas and solutions in Cheyenne.
First, I want to thank you for coming out tonight, and I want to walk you back just a little bit, a few days in our history. 242 years ago, in 6 days, there's 51 men gathered in Philadelphia. And I want to read to you some of the prose that rolled off the pen of Thomas Jefferson at that time, because it memorializes what we're here for tonight. As it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, the right to liberty, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these blessings, the governments only derive their consent from the governed. I'm here to ask you tonight, as a representative or a candidate for Senate District 11, for your consent to the governed. I think it's only right and proper that we have these opportunities under our Constitution and the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America. That we look back at the form of government that our founders gave us that led us to where we're at today. I would tell you, I've had the opportunity and the pleasure for the last 8 years to serve as your state senator for Senate District 11. It's been a tremendous opportunity. I wish more people had the opportunity to work in government. I will tell you, one of the biggest threats that we have today is the lack of people that didn't show up here tonight. Government's run by the people who show up, folks. And right now, that's you. And we, as candidates, come to seek your consent. What's the proper role of government? That's a question that we should all ask ourselves. If we go back to what the original intent of what the founders said, they said the proper role of government is to protect those God-given, unalienable rights. That is the proper role of government. After that, everything else is secondary. What I'll tell you is the last 8 years as your senator, I'm not going to go through some of the achievements and the things that I've done to represent you. On the back table back there, I brought you a whole list of independent entities that rank how legislators in the Wyoming legislature vote. From the Liberty Index to People for Liberty to the American Conservative Union. I will tell you that if you go through that on the libertarian and the conservative side, I am a constitutional, strict constructionist conservative, a long time before I ever became a Republican. I will adhere to those constitutional principles and the rule of law. That's the way I govern. I want to say one thing that's important. When you walk onto the floor of the Wyoming legislature, you check your politics at the door. Because at that point in time, it's not about politics anymore, folks. It's about affecting good government for the people of the state of Wyoming. Thank you.
Thank you both. While you're introducing yourselves, we did get a couple of questions in. So we will begin with the first one. Please tell us your feelings about equal rights as it applies to LGBTQ citizens of our state.
I feel, and of course, Senator Hicks read or quoted that we have unalienable rights. I feel that government has no right to say who you love, what you talk about with your doctor, what happens in your home. Those are not things that government should be involved with on any level. And so anything that would restrict those or outline those, I would be very much against. I also would like to see, though, some legislation that has to do with the lack of preventing discrimination based on sexual orientation, LGBTQ society.
When it comes to LGBT now, and I think it's Q also, those rights are already protected as citizens of the United States of America. We've already got Supreme Court rulings that say those rights are protected under the Constitution of the United States of America. Affecting more legislation to really affect what we think is a moral issue, and it's how we treat each other and how we have dignity and respect for people, regardless of your race, your color, your creed, your sexual preference. Folks, all the rules and all the laws that we pass are not going to affect that change. We can pass anti-discrimination laws. We can pass all of that stuff. Of all the laws we have back to the civil rights of 1964, has that stopped any racism or discrimination in this country? It really starts with the individual and what you find here in your heart, and what you fundamentally believe in your soul. So when we come and try to carve out special provisions, those rights are already protected under the federal Constitution.
Okay, second question.
I feel that these issues have come up in the state of Wyoming, and you are saying that.
We can't turn your mic on. Put the mic on, ma'am.
I feel that these issues have come up in the state of Wyoming, and I have seen the way that the legislature has voted. And I think in saying that they're protected by the federal government is not really totally truthful. And I would like to hear a little more about how you have voted and about how you would vote if these issues came up now in the state legislature.
Well, in the last probably 6 years, there's been 2 bills that came before the Wyoming legislature to carve out protected class status for LGBT community. The first year, that did not pass. It came up again last year. It failed in the Wyoming Senate, and it failed in the Wyoming Senate because of the Supreme Court rulings and the fact that the federal government already protects them. So it's just putting additional statute. How did I vote? I voted against it. I voted against it because it was an unnecessary law because those protections already exist today.
I, of course, didn't have the opportunity to vote, but with your support, I'll have the opportunity to vote for that types of legislation in the upcoming legislative sessions. I feel pretty strongly that there needs to be some protection because we just relying on trying to teach to the federal law and saying that they're already protected, but we see discrimination and discriminatory policies every day. And I would like to work with my Republican counterparts in the Wyoming House as well as in the Senate and try to come together and just to reiterate that no one should be held down because who they choose to love.
Okay, so our next question has to do with Endow. What do you think about the new Endow plan that Governor Meade has put in motion?
So Endow's needed diversification of Wyoming's economy, and that's what the intent is. In the case of Endow right now, my personal beliefs is we got the cart in front of the horse. It's a little premature. We appropriated $42 million for 3 different initiatives and then an additional $2 million for one that might have a little bit of merits. The reason that I think that Endow is a little premature is because it really doesn't get to the fundamental basics of our economy in the state of Wyoming. There's a perception out there that if we try to do what all of our neighbors is, somehow it's going to make our economy better. And I will tell you my own personal philosophy is I will not sacrifice the customs, the culture, and the economy that we currently have, and especially rural Wyoming, on the sake of economic development that turns us into something that we won't recognize. Within the Endow program now, we're doing subsidies for airline tickets, additional subsidies for grant programs. The concept, I think, is sound with the appropriation of $42 million to start this thing before we even had a plan. The initial legislation for Endow said that we will have an economic development plan. We didn't have one last session, and we started throwing $42 million out there in a shotgun approach and hoping something would stick. I think that was the wrong approach.
I have to somewhat agree with Senator Hicks on this. I also feel that it was a large appropriation of money when we already have the Wyoming Business Council and other entities that work very diligently on bringing diversification to the state. Yes, we need to start to move away from being extraction-based economy. This boom bust just doesn't serve us well. And I agree with that, but I also agree with Senator Hicks that we need a plan before we get such a large appropriation.
All right, my question is actually threefold. I know. Where does public education fall in your list of priorities for Wyoming? And second of all, how will you determine state funding for students? Will it be proficiency-based or growth-based? And third of all, what are your views on Common Core curriculum?
Okay, the first question, the public education is outlined in the Constitution of the state as our number one thing that needs to be funded. This last legislative session, our own Representative Paxton and Representative Harshman worked really hard making a plan to properly fund education across the state. And I would like to be able to go to Cheyenne and work with them and help that plan come to fruition. I think education is the number one priority that we have. I did get the endorsement of the Wyoming Education Association, so I guess they agree. I'm trying to think of what the next question was.
So the second question was, how will you determine state funding for schools? Will it be proficiency-based or growth-based?
Growth-based. That's kind of a short answer. But the funding needs to be equal all the way across the state. The children who are in the school in Baggs, Wyoming deserve the same good, great education as the children in Cheyenne. So we want to make sure that all of our children have the opportunity to become the best they have and their best potential.
The final question was, what are your views on the Common Core curriculum?
Common Core curriculum is an area that I probably need to study more about. If it means that every school has to teach in exactly the same way, I don't believe that that's the way to go about it. I've seen some wonderful innovations in our own school here on how to reach children of all levels and to bring them along meet them in the way that they learn the best. So, but I would have to learn more about Common Core.
Education.
Okay, the first question, where does public education fall in your list of priorities for Wyoming?
Public education is one of our highest priorities. It's certainly one of my priorities. And it's not just K through 12. It's for our community colleges and our universities. It's for our job programs. It really is, Wyoming is a gem when it comes to the rest of the United States. We spend more in the region per student than any other state surrounding us. We pay our teachers, who are now about 9th in the nation when you take in the whole benefit package. We need to continue to lead in the region and the nation on our education. So for me, it is one of the big priorities that we need to grapple with. So let me tell you where we're at with education. We have a $600 million shortfall going into the last legislative session. It's the 500-pound gorilla in the state of Wyoming, and the debate is what is the appropriate level of funding, not what is the appropriate priority for education. I will tell you, in the Wyoming Senate and the House, education is one of our number one priorities. The debate is what's the appropriate level of funding for that, not the priority. Next question.
Next question, how will you determine state funding for schools? Will it be proficiency-based or growth-based?
It absolutely has to have a combination of both. You have to address the growth in areas as those occur around the state, and you have to get to the proficiency issue. As you as a taxpayer, we have a responsibility to make sure that when we experience those growth, and we put that, the highest amount in the region, $17,000 a year for every kid in K through 12. That's what we spend in the state of Wyoming. That the taxpayers of the state of Wyoming also have the assurances that those kids are getting a quality education. So it has to have some level of performance based in there. So it's got to be a combination of both.
And technically we're out of time, but I will still ask the third question for your answer. What are your views on the Common Core curriculum?
Yeah, I think Common Core, while there may have been a few things in there that were good, there was also some things that were really bad. The problem with Common Core was a federal mandate. It come down from Washington, D.C., that you're going to teach your kids in Wyoming this curriculum. That is the failure with Common Core. We are held blackmail in the state of Wyoming. We spend $1.6 billion per biennium on K through 12. We get about $140 million from the federal government, and they want to dictate the curriculum in Encampment, Wyoming, the same as they do Naples, Florida, and Washington, D.C. That's a disservice to the students in the state of Wyoming, and I would abolish Common Core in the state of Wyoming.
Okay, so I'll have a question from the audience, and then I have a written question for you both.
Mr. Hicks, I remember last time you ran, you were staunchly opposed to the public utilizing public funds for our own health care. I'd like to know where you stand today, and I'd like to hear from Leanne about what you think about health care for the people with our own dollars. Because I remember you saying that it's not federal money, it's our money, but we can't utilize it for our own well-being.
I believe, if I may, you might be referencing the debate on Medicaid expansion within the state of Wyoming under the provisions of Obamacare. Is that what you're referencing?
I was just recalling a forum that you were at in Saratoga when you ran last time, and you were staunchly opposed to utilizing public money for public health.
Well, I've never taken that position, public money against public health. That's a mischaracterization. Now, I've been opposed, and my voting record is clear. I've opposed expansion of Medicaid into the state of Wyoming. Here's a fundamental belief in government. And what is the responsibility of role of government? I'm going to tell you, and Rod talked about it, we have a $21 trillion federal debt. Medicaid is insolvent. The deal that the feds give us is, again, gets back to the Common Core. It's you take it under our terms. We could have passed Medicaid expansion in the state of Wyoming had they allowed the state of Wyoming to tailor it with some provisions that fit the state of Wyoming instead of one size fits all. There were several bills in there that the Republicans supported, and we couldn't get it passed because it was the one size fits all from the Department of Health in Washington, D.C. So getting back to the issue of Medicaid expansion, I'm opposed to it. I think every generation ought to have to pay their own bills. That $21 trillion, when you expand Medicaid, is going to cost your children and your grandchildren. That debt's not yours. You're putting that on the backs of future generations of citizens of the United States. And quite frankly, I think that's inherent for us not to live within our own fiscal means.
If the question is Medicaid expansion, I would have voted for it. I would have voted for it because our very own, our governor, our Wyoming Hospital Association, our Physicians Association, our people in this county wanted it. And that's what I feel my number one job is to represent my district in the best way. And if that's what they want me to say in Cheyenne, that's what I will do. I feel that, particularly Obamacare has its issues and it does need work. But that Medicaid expansion is money that we're already paying federally, taxes that need to come back to us. It was brought up earlier about the question of whether or not we're going to have a hospital in Rawlins when they can't make their bills, and Medicaid expansion would have made a large difference in the security of our health care.
And who pays for this? Who pays for the Medicaid expansion? Is it already paid for? So you're saying it's already paid for? Answer the question.
Medicaid expansion was already paid for.
Okay, Chia, if I understand it correctly, you're following up on Chris's question, asking how is the Medicaid expansion paid?
That's correct. If you want to expand Medicaid, then who pays for it? Who pays for this?
Okay.
So the Medicaid expansion program that was offered up under Obamacare is the feds would have contributed 90% of the original cost for the first 3 years. No guarantees after that. The state would have to put up the other 10% for the first 3 years, which was roughly about $20 to $30 million that the state of Wyoming would have had to put up. Again, it's coming from the federal government that has a $21 trillion debt rising. Who pays for it? Your great grandkids. That's who's going to pay for that debt.
It was, I feel that it's federally paid for already, and that's our money that was set aside in Obamacare. 90% of our expansion costs would be covered by the federal government.
Hi, yes. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you to the Bear Trap for hosting this and everybody that's participating. My name is Jessica Nada. I have a question for you. Also, I will make this two-part. My question is, as representative for District 11, what real actions will you take to mitigate threats of fire within the area? And at this time, I would like to take the encampment fireman boot and pass it around the room, if you feel you want to raise money for that. Thank you very much. So again, the question is, what real action will you take to mitigate fire threats within the local area?
Given the fact that I live over the hill and we share the same forest and we're neighbors, it's something that I've worked diligently on the last 8 years. One of the issues that we were able to do last year, that I was able to accomplish actually about 5 years ago, was to put a additional forester, a state-funded forester embedded in the BLM office in Rawlins, to be able to start to move not only fuels off the national forest and the public domain, but to also get a supply of timber coming in to stimulate the economy and support the sawmill. That position has now moved on from a shared position between the state of Wyoming and the BLM. It's now a shared position with the BLM, the United States Forest Service. That position is housed here in the Platte Valley. That's one of the actions I did last year. One of the other things that we did as chairman of the Agriculture, Public Lands, and Water Committee, we sponsored legislation to allow local county fire departments to tap into the Emergency Fire Suppression Fund from the state of Wyoming, to be able to utilize those funds and get reimbursed when you have a federal fire that calls out local resources, and you can get reimbursed. Sometimes that would take 6 to 9 months to get, and sometimes a year to get paid back from the feds. The state will now do that. That's something I've worked on and got that legislation passed last year. The other thing that we've done is I've helped shepherd almost $20 million through the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund. A lot of that money goes to prescribed burning and fuel reductions. I've also supported through the budget a $1 million appropriation for the last 4 years. It goes into state forestry for the reduction of bark beetle epidemic within the state of Wyoming. Those are 4 different specific things that I've worked on. And a lot of that money has been spent here in Carbon County and is available to Carbon County.
Senator Hicks has worked on some awesome help on the fires that we have here in our federal lands. One of the only other things that I would like to see, I do like to see a much better cooperation between our state, local, and federal officials, just on a regular basis, not necessarily at the emergency level when we have a fire as Beaver Creek or Badger Creek. But I would like also to stimulate more public-private partnerships in some of our trail management, our campgrounds, and our areas across in the district, that we would work together so that there's so many more eyes on what's going on and what's happening, and some creative ideas on how we can deal with the particular issues that are going on in our forest. I just don't think we have enough people in a general sense. So.
Okay, so moving on to some of our written questions. Would you each please address your thoughts regarding renewable energy development? in Wyoming?
I think renewables have a big place in Wyoming. I've always said my policy is all of the above. But each type of energy source that we need to bring on needs to pay for its way. In other words, we can't do renewables if they're heavily subsidized by the taxpayers or they're regulated to the point that they pick winners and choosers. The government shouldn't be involved in choosing what type of energy that you get. And right now, the market through a federal law called PURPA basically mandates that the public utilities have to buy renewables, even when they're not at market price, which drives up your electric bill. We have state portfolios that require renewable portfolios. Colorado's example, Carbon Power Light is a member of that Colorado cooperative. You pay a higher electric bill today because of a law in Colorado that demands that they have to purchase renewables.
1 minute, Larry.
That being said, I'm an all above that, but they need to pay their way, whether it's wind, solar, geothermal, natural gas, nuclear, hydro, any of those sources need to be on a competitive market base because the consumers of Wyoming, you and me, are the ones that are going to pay for that. So that's my position on. The other thing I would just say when it comes to mitigating some of the impacts, regardless of the energy source, I've always said Wyoming has world-class energy, whether it's coal, natural gas, or wind. Wyoming deserves world-class mitigation associated with the impacts. We are the OPAC. We produce 25% of the electricity generated in the United States comes from Wyoming: oil, coal, natural gas, and wind. And we deserve the mitigation for that.
Currently in carbon light fuel power, we're at 30% of our energy is being generated by alternative sources. I also am all of the above. I believe that coal and gas and oil still have a place in our energy package. But I think as renewables the prices come down on renewables, I think that our electricity costs will be offset from that. I also feel pretty strongly that there is already large subsidies in our oil and gas industry. And there, when people talk about subsidizing alternative energy, let's also talk about how much subsidies have happened with our oil and gas industry.
Okay, so with this following question, I believe that it'd probably be best for Mr. Hicks to address this first. It would appear the West Fork Reservoir would benefit a handful at the expense of the general population. Is that right?
Can you repeat that question? Yeah, louder.
The question was, it would appear the West Fork Reservoir would benefit a handful at the expense of the general population. Is that right?
No, that is not right. And let me explain why, because when we talk about endow and economics and value added, the way you generate economy in the state of Wyoming is you put value added to your natural resources. In the case of water, which is probably our most valuable natural resource, because we harness that. The West Fork of Battle Creek will supply almost $24 million of economic benefit to the agricultural community within Carbon County and the greater area. It has almost $23 million of economic benefit for the recreation side. The West Fork of Battle Creek was selected as the site based on the least environmental impacts and with the most positive impacts for recreational fisheries. You want to add value value? You want to create economy in Wyoming? You put that water to work, and you put it to work for agriculture, you put it to work for our tourist industry. I will guarantee you that West Fork of Battle Creek project goes in. The majority of that $23 million of economic development through enhanced fisheries and recreation opportunities is going to come right through this community. They're gonna go right through this bar and cafe, and they're gonna stop at the store and the gas station. That's what the economists have come up with and said roughly $23 million of economic benefit. And a 50-year life expectancy. That reservoir has a 100-year life expectancy. How do you create an economy with our natural resources that supports the customs and culture of the Platte Valley and the Little Snake River Valley? We harness that water and we put it to work for agriculture, the environment, and for our recreationalists.
How do you explain that reservoir, that the 23 million you're talking about started out with a much lower number?
And here.
Yeah, you use the microphone, Susan.
Really quick, Susan.
A follow-up. On that issue, they said that you said it would generate 23 million.
You said it would generate $23 million. And in the original report, that number was significantly lower. So that report got moved and changed and to fit this dollar amount. So I'm confused about what that really will generate in our small community.
So let me address that. There was no original report, there's a draft. And a draft was circulated, and it's exactly that. That's a draft. You put something together and you send it out for peer review. In this case, the peer review went out and they come back and said, you haven't considered the economic benefits from the reoperation of High Savory Reservoir to benefit the fisheries downstream. You haven't looked at the operation of the reservoir to restore Colorado River cutthroat in the upper drainage. You haven't looked at the economic benefits in the main stem of the Little Snake. That original draft looked at the economic benefits of the fisheries strictly in the pool reservoir. So it was sent back out, the economists looked at it, the people made the comments and said, these are the true economic benefits, go back, reevaluate those and look at those. So the draft was a draft. The final and the only report that's been finalized for that shows, based on the economics of that reservoir, that it generates about $23 to $24 million in recreational benefits. That doesn't include construction benefits. So it's a 2.5-year project, about $70 million. Those construction jobs are going to stay here in Carbon County, and probably a lot of them in this community, because we can't let Riverside or closer to that site than Baggs, Dixon, and Savory. So a lot of those construction workers is approximately $7 to $10 million in economic benefit from those construction workers during the time of that reservoir's construction.
Okay, I will
say that Senator Hicks has been working on this particular issue for probably since 2011, I believe. And so he's going to know a lot more about it than me. I do know that it's for late season irrigating for a handful of irrigators. I would like for you to try to take a drive over there and look at High Savory right now, what it looks like. Look at High Savory Creek as it flows out of Savory, Little Savory, and you'll see that it's dry right now. When you are exploring over there, and the maps for this reservoir are available on Google Earth, so you can look exactly where it's going to go. And take a look at...
Sorry, I just want to interrupt. On numerous occasions, Google is incorrect with the information they've provided, the maps for Wyoming.
Okay. There is one that's specific to that report. And you will look at a beautiful, beautiful canyon that will take, I don't remember how many feet tall of a dam. It's going to be a very, very expensive project for very little benefit.
You know, I think it's always interesting how we sometimes demean irrigators. Approximately 100 people, 100 small businesses, agricultural businesses would benefit from that. How many small businesses do you have in the community here that you would denigrate, saying that for some reason it only benefits 100 small business people here in this community? So I think that's a mischaracterization when we do that. Those ag benefits are real. You're right. You can go over there right now. High savory's flowing. In fact, if you go to Wyoming Wildlife magazine, they highlighted an article last year in their October issues about the phenomenal fishery below that. Also articulated in there that if we do additional storage, we will reoperate high savory to maximize those benefits, put more water downstream for those recreational users. So, you have to get your information, factual information, from the reports. You can't get it off the internet, off some blog, or information like that. You've got to deal with the facts of the situation. The facts are 100 small business people in this county would benefit. The facts are it would generate $24 million of economic activity in Carbon County. The facts are it would generate $23 million in economic activity for recreation. I guess if we don't want to do economic development in Carbon County and do value added for our natural resources, then we could do something else. I would tell you this is something that could benefit this county substantially.
Okay, so moving on.
Wildfire is a good source, I thought.
Okay.
You've already done.
Okay, so
Already done a follow-up and redirect, so.
yeah, we've already had a follow-up
you
and
need to watch
redirect,
yourself.
unfortunately, Ann, so we're gonna move forward. We did just receive a phone call with a question. So I will get that question first. And then we will
The
move on.
phone actually rang, wow.
Yeah, apparently our live feed is actually reaching people. So the question, and the person said they were okay with their name being on this. Ken Kasner of Elk Mountain wanted to know, and this was directed for you, Mr. Hicks, and what going forward would you do for Eastern Carbon County?
That's always an interesting question, and I don't just represent Eastern Carbon County. I represent Western Albany County, all of Carbon County, and a third of Sweetwater County. 13 municipalities, 5 school districts, 3 county commissions. I don't just represent isolated communities. I represent everybody in my Senate district. It's not always easy. But you can't just single out and say, I'm going to give special preference as a legislature to one area over another. I don't view my job as this preferential treatment. It's to represent everybody, every region of my district. So I don't know what Mr. Kasner is looking for, but that's not the way I vote. I don't look at things as this is just good for my community or that community. It's the whole district. I do the best job I'm capable of doing with the information I have at the time to represent all of the constituents in my district.
One of the things that I'd like to do to be able to represent our district was one of them that I started last night. I went to town meeting at Medicine Bow. And it was very interesting to listen to some of the issues and problems that they have. By golly, they're the same ones we had in encampment in Riverside. And I thought that it was very interesting to really get a good concept of the issues that some of the state departments and the mandates that they have and how they affect our small communities. An example is the closing of our landfills. You may know something about that. Our landfills are being consolidated in the state by DEQ. The effort and the expense in a community such as the size of Encampment or Riverside or Medicine Bow is tremendous. And one of the things that I would like to do is to be able to take those concerns of those small town communities and those town my brain is okay.
1 minute left, Leanne.
Town councils and mayors, and make sure that when we're looking at legislation that's going to affect the whole state, Have we taken consideration the rural natures of where we live and how difficult it is to make some of those DEQ requirements, for instance?
Okay, so I would like to make 2 points here. One, we'll take one more question and then we're going to move on to our state representatives. Second, I would ask that while our candidates are talking, whether or not you disagree with what they're saying, if you could not interrupt and be raucous, that would be appreciated. They are here to talk with you. So I would really appreciate a little bit more decorum. Thank you. You can certainly comment.
Well, I mean, it's kind of, it has to do with. It
It
has to do with the question, but it goes back to endow, it goes back to the 100 people that are going to be benefiting from water. Are we not forgetting who feeds us? I mean, come on, agriculture, beef, that's what feeds us. So those 100 people are going to help feed us. So anyone that is saying, oh, well, only 100 people will benefit, all of us are going to benefit from our agriculture. Next.
Okay, thank you for your comment, Chia. Unless anybody else has a question for the candidates, I thank them for their time and move on to our state representatives.
Website. Sure. Let's go for that too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Especially when you're in a 3D series.
Rock, paper, scissors, see what
All right, guys, you ready? My name is Julie McAllister. I'm running for State House 47. This would be my third time bothering poor Mr. Paxton over there. First and foremost, happy birthday, Wyoming. Everyone seems to know about that, right? Come on now. Equality out of necessity. Not really good introduction, so I'm just going to play off the fact it's the 10th of July. Most of us were taught in school. I was not fortunate enough to be raised in Wyoming, not by choice. I was born in 1980. Parents left for work before I was a twinkle in my daddy's eye. I didn't get a choice in that one. Came home as soon as I could. But building on the fact we are on the 10th of July, Wyoming was the first state to grant women voting rights because we didn't have enough people. Freedom from necessity. People ask you all the time, normally, especially engaged voters, why are you running? Why are you running? Why are you running? Why are you doing this? And, you know, especially after your first race, second race, third race, you go, why am I doing this? This isn't much fun. It's pretty simple. Put your money where your mouth is. You get up and you can do something about it. Do your best. You're going to make mistakes. Keep trying. Or you can sit around and complain and do nothing. That's pretty much my introduction. Other than that, questions for me, I have handouts on the table. If you don't get a chance to ask it here, I can't encourage you enough to ask me. If I don't know, I will tell you I don't know. If I'm not sure, I'll tell you I'm not sure. I'm not here to lie. I'm not here to BS. I'm just here to put my money where my mouth is. So, Mr. Paxton.
Well, thank you, Margaret, and thank you for all of the rest of you still hanging out here. There was crowd is thinning out for sure. Most of you know me, but just for those who don't, I'll give you a quick bio. I'm a fifth generation Wyomingite, was raised up in the Bighorn Basin, have an ag background, was a military policeman in the Army, and then went to school at the University of Wyoming where I have 2 degrees from a master's and a bachelor's degree. Came to encampment
It'll be 47 years ago on the 15th of this month. I remember that because my daughter was born on the 13th, so she was 2 days old when I got the job here. I have been a teacher for 27 years and 7 years as a school principal here in Encampment and also over in Hannah. I retired in 2005, I guess it was, and ran for county commissioner, was elected to that position. I've also been the mayor and on the town council of both the encampment and Riverside. When I lived in Encampment, I did that over here too. So I'm on a downward spiral, no doubt about that. I'm serving my third term at the House of Representatives. I'm serving right now as chairman of the Natural Resources Funding Committee. I'm vice chairman of the Education Committee. Also serve on the Revenue Committee and the Select Water Committee. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you both. While you were doing introductions, we got a question in. Can you give us a concise platform so we know what to expect from you? And either one of you can take this first.
Well, I don't know exactly what they're expecting here from as an exact platform, but I think, you know, I'm fiscal conservative and I'm pretty moderate when it comes to social issues. And so I just follow the guidelines along my belief system as these bills come up and move forward with it. I don't have an axe to grind. I didn't come here with any particular mission except to serve the people of House District 47, which by the way is the largest legislative district in lower 48 states, 12,118 square miles. A very time-consuming job. Runs from Rock River clear to Farson. As previous speakers said, it's 13 municipalities, 5 school districts, 3 county commissions, and so maintaining contact with all those folks so that we can represent them, I guess, would be my platform, is to do the best job I can to represent all of the people in this huge district.
Well, I'll certainly agree on the fact this is a big district. This is a big job, and that's a big question. What's your platform on what is going to be my second question to that one. This is a challenging district and a challenging state. To live here, we have to want to be here, period. You don't make it if you don't. To try to run for House of Representatives, you have to want to do it, and you have to want to be there. You have to care about where we are, what we have. If you want a platform, that's what I can give you that's true, without it being on a topic specific and me making things up or being too vague to say anything to you. I care about Wyoming. I'm here because I want to be here, same as I'm sure almost all of you are. I care about the state. I care about what we have. I go back and visit family in other states, and within a few minutes I've got road rage and can't wait to go home. I can't stand being there. I care about this place. I want it to be here for my kids, for my grandkids, for their grandkids. I want it to remain wild, to remain Wyoming and belong. To be itself, but still have a place in the United States that represents what's uniquely wild and crazy and fantastic about Wyoming. We have 110-degree days and 77 below. I love it. My mother thinks I'm nuts, but I love it. I think it's great. So the best I can give you for a platform without being vague or off topic is to tell you that I care about the state as much as I care about my family and as much as I care about my relationship with God. It's that important to me. This is important to me. This place is important. The people are important. Your lives are important. That's my platform. That's who I am. That's what I care about. That's the most honest answer I can give you.
So I appreciate the honesty about the platform, but I'm looking for specifics. Like, what do you think about like a living wage for people in the Carbon County? Do you believe in a $15 minimum wage? do you believe that college education should be a right, or should it be like based upon like your income level? Like what do you believe on that sort of thing?
Do you believe in socialism?
You asked two questions there, and I'm gonna repeat the questions back to you, if that's okay, so I understand them. Your first one was about living wage, and you gave the example of the $15 an hour wage. Your second one was based upon college education, if that should be a right. And you didn't say this, but I want to ask for clarity. Are you asking, is that a right or is it a privilege in my platform politically?
Right. In your personal view, like what do you think about that?
Okay, well, I'll answer both your questions, starting with the living wage. I don't like the term living wage at all. I was raised in extreme poverty. My mom rented our house out in the summertime so we had somewhere to go. Because we were too poor. We had to. But I don't believe in a living wage. Everything I have, everything my family has was because we went out and busted our butts, our time away from our kids, our time away from our husbands, our wives, and we worked for it and made it. So I don't believe in a living wage. I don't believe in restricting businesses that way. I just don't. And I'm happy to hear any argument against it. That's one thing about me that may be unique is I will listen. On your second question, if college should be a right or a privilege, I'm sorry, I think it's a privilege. I think it's absolutely beyond amazing that in Wyoming we have the halfway. Do you realize how special that is? If you do well in school, you do what you're supposed to do, you can go to college and it's paid for. That's fantastic. That's something you need to earn. You can't just hand out taxpayer money for someone to go, not to mention 4-year degrees, 2-year degrees, master's degrees are certainly not the only good living you can make. There's plenty of jobs out there turning wrenches and it pays well and we need those jobs. Working on air conditioning, being a carpenter, being a welder, being a metal worker, being a rancher, being a farmer. Those are jobs we need to function. It's not just college. So I hope I answered your question comprehensively.
Thank you very much.
When you're talking about living wage, I'm assuming you're talking about minimum wage. So what you're talking about, I think Wyoming's got it about right. I don't think there's any reason to manipulate anything that besides what we have going right now. I just don't think, I think it could be counterproductive. So I really couldn't support that. As far as college concerned, you know, as a former educator, I had some concerns about pushing every kid to get a 4-year degree, you know. Is a degree in underwater basket weaving as important as an associate's degree in farming, ranching, you know? And so the Hathaway Scholarship actually provides way more opportunities for our kids in Wyoming than many states. So maybe in a way we are an entitlement state because we've taken some of that mineral wealth and put it toward going to college. But I'm not convinced that every kid needs to have a college degree. I think every kid needs to have some kind of a goal after they graduate from high school. That could be going into the military. That could be going to a trade school. That could be going to a community college to learn a trade. And one of the bills that I've really been pushing for is to look at that scholarship, the Hathaway Scholarship, and be able to award all 4 years, instead of spreading it out over all 4 years. If you're inclined to get an associate's degree, to give it to you in 2 years. Because if you're at the lowest level of the Hathaway Scholarship, which a lot of our kids are that are interested in going into some of the trades, that could make the difference about whether or not they can go to college. So, you know, I'm not too sure Wyoming has it wrong. I think we're doing a pretty good job on all fronts.
Okay, so we have a written question, and this one will be able to be answered by whoever wants to take it first. I'm concerned about the trend of federal lands turn to state control. Our state can't afford this. Selling seems to be the next option. Selling to the next option, or give it to mining interests. Giving over mining interests. Yeah. I'm concerned about the trend of federal lands turned to state control. Our state can't afford this. Selling seems the next option, or give it over to mining interests. What are your plans to protect our hunting and fishing and public lands?
Well, I would resist any effort to have the state assume control over our federal lands. I think that we have enough checks and balances to make sure that we're able to have a multiple use concept across our landscape, and I don't see any real need for the state to take over that. I think it's an undue burden. If you look at the cost of managing all these lands, if you look at what the BLM, the Forest Service is paying, even on fire suppression alone, can you imagine what that would be like? And if we got the federal lands, would we get the mineral royalties that come along with them? And it's probably doubtful that we would. So without those, we'd have an awful time trying to pay the bills. I think, you know, keeping the public lands in Wyoming, it's one of our real strengths is that we do have a lot of public lands for hunting, fishing, do all those kind of multiple use things, logging, but all the things that we do. So I don't see any, could not support any movement for the state to take over public lands.
I'm going to take this question just a step farther, which is probably a mistake, but I've done a lot of ill-advised things in my life, so who cares? Public lands belong in public hands, period. I don't see an exception to that. I don't see an argument against it. If you disagree with me, I'm sorry. I'd be happy to hear your argument, and I will listen to it, but I don't agree with it. Hunting is about the fourth most important thing in my life. I enjoy it. I love it. It's how I feed my family. Our public lands don't need to be going anywhere. A lot of times they like to do trade-offs. They take 40 acres over here and they trade it for 80 acres over there. Okay, well, 40 acres over here can be used by campers, hunters, fishers, people who log, people who bird watch. 80 acres over there might be nothing but antelope and prairie dogs. It's an excuse. It's a way for someone else to make money, and I don't want to hear about it. I will listen to arguments against it, and I will listen with an open mind. But public land belongs in public hands, period. Federal lands need to be left to the federal government unless there's an actual use that affects Wyoming residents that we need to consider. If there's a use that our residents are using federal lands for, and a solid, strong argument that we could better management on a state level, I'd hear the argument. Probably do a little of my own research, but I'd hear the argument. But that doesn't mean the state gets to sell it. That means it stays public land, period. And that's what's most important to me.
Okay, anybody else have a question for representatives?
Cody, you should ask them your education question again. Your three-part wonderful education question. Can we ask my three-part wonderful education?
Yeah, let me find it.
Why not?
I'd like to hear what they have to say about that.
Okay, so here's our rerun. First question. Where does public education fall in your list of priorities for Wyoming?
Can we do this three-part question this way and answer each part so he gets a comprehensive answer for both of us out of fairness?
Hello, Tony.
Education. Does anybody here not agree with me? And if you don't, we probably don't have too much to say to each other that once you have children, you're not number one anymore. I don't have much more to say about education other than that. It's one of the most important things we can do for our children. And as far as government goes, it is the most important thing we can do for our children. They deserve the best we can give them, not just because it's in our Constitution, because it's the right thing to do, period.
Okay, second question. How will you determine state funding for schools? Will it be proficiency-based or growth-based?
On this one, I think we need a balance, and unfortunately, when we ask for balance in government and in these decisions, especially when it involves money, which most things in government tend to involve money, it gets complicated. We have a performance system in place. Myself, as many other candidates, were interviewed by Wyoming Educators Association. I know Mr. Paxton, especially, is quite familiar with Educators Association, with his past work history and everything else. There has to be some performance in here. We can't. Let me back up for 1 second, then I'll move back forward. Sorry about that. Our school districts pride themselves on having their individualities and having the ability to run their districts to their needs. And I think that makes a lot of sense in a state like Wyoming. Each district has unique challenges, and they have different townships and things they're facing that's different one county line over. So I don't have too much of an issue with that. But we need to have some standards in place. Those standards aren't real universal. So we need to find middle ground, and this needs to include conversations with the districts themselves. Finding out what kind of performance standards we need, but it also needs to be with growth. You can't double the population size and let's pretend in elementary school and gave them the same amount of money and expect there not to be a problem. Little logic here, come on now. We need both. There has to be both. You're a busy guy right now. You're just a busy dude.
Very busy, so I apologize about that. If it is okay with Representative Paxton, we'll ask you the third question. Okay. What are your views on the Common Core curriculum?
I agree with a little bit, well, not a little bit, quite a bit Mr. Hicks said. I don't like the federal government coming into states saying, here's what you're going to do. Boom. That doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't seem logical for them to get a universal across the United States and say, here's your education standard, period, across every single subject. We just wrote this up, now do it. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. A few things in Common Core, I broke down the math quite a bit. Honestly, out of curiosity from a lot of what my other friends were saying, I wondered if it was really that bad. And then I found out, wow, it really is that bad. That's a little sick. There's a young lady who's been through engineering classes. That's really sick and twisted, in my opinion. I didn't like a lot of it. But my biggest problem with it is the federal government coming in saying, you're going to do this. You're going to meet this standard or else. I don't like being told that in my life. Most people in Wyoming don't like being told that in theirs, and I'm not quite sure where they get the gall. It's our taxpayer money that pays for education. Why are they setting the standards? Doesn't make a lot of sense there to me.
Okay, Mr. Paxton, since Julie had 3 minutes to answer these questions, I will give you 3 minutes as well. So, would you like me to repeat the questions?
Well, was the first question where education on my priority list? Well, after spending most of my life in education, I guess it'd probably have to be at the top of the list. You know, it consumes half of our total budget. On a $3 billion budget, we're spending about $1.5 billion on education on a biennium basis. And so if it isn't at the top of your list, it certainly has to be on the very top of most people's list. Kids are our future.
Okay, second question. How will you determine state funding for schools? Will it be proficiency-based or growth-based?
Well, we don't have a lot of choice on how we fund schools. We had a series of court cases that mandated how we fund schools in the state of Wyoming. And so the way it reads is that the mineral wealth of Wyoming belongs to everyone. So by virtue of accident of birth, if you're born in Gillette or you're born in Medicine Bow, you should have the same opportunities from one end to the other. So in getting to the final decision of this, the Washakie case and the Campbell cases determined the future of funding and education for the state of Wyoming. And what it says is that we have to fully fund an educational model, and that educational model has to be evidence-based. And so we have to, in order to, I know a lot of people are kind of like I am. They don't like the idea of spending a huge amount of money on consultants, but in Wyoming, we're forced into that situation. We have to hire a consultant to come up with an evidence-based funding mechanism for the state of Wyoming. And so we had the same company looking for examining this for the last couple of sessions. We had a different company this last time. If we would have adopted the model that they were suggesting, it would have cost us another $60 million a biennium. So we reverted to the model that we're in right now, made some modifications to it, cut about $23 million out of the budget, as opposed to the, $60 million that the Senate tried to get us to cut or whatever it was. But we were able to cut some money outside of the model, but the model has to be fully funded, and it's no excuse that we do not have the funding. We have to find the funding. So that's the way the court system has ruled.
Okay, final question. What are your views on the Common Core curriculum?
Well, the Common Core went away quite a while ago. It's now that Every Student Succeeds Act is the new rule, and our State Department of Education has just promulgated all the rules to comply with the Every Student Succeeds Act. And so we have in Wyoming what we call a basket of goods that we fully fund. So without boring you and going into a lot of detail, I'll just say that that's a thing of the past.
Thank you. Okay, so believe it or not, we got another phone call question. Also from Mr. Ken Kasner of Elk Mountain, and this follows up on the education question. And the question is Wyoming adequately funded for education? And Mr. Kasner expressed that he would like some specifics as to how Wyoming is adequately funded for education.
Well, I hope Mr. Kasner was paying attention to my last answer, because I don't think we have a lot of choice. We have to adequately fund the education in Wyoming. It is on an evidence-based model, and that's the rule we follow. There's not a lot of wiggle room on that. So yes, Wyoming education is adequately funded.
I guess to clarify here really quick, Mr. Paxton. So Mr. Kessler's question was, I guess, how is Wyoming adequately funded? In what way are we funding our education in the state?
Well, I'll guarantee you it was a very creative process over this last session. In addition to the budget, we had 340 bills brought to us, and that's just ridiculous. We need to get that changed. But getting back to the topic, working with the Speaker of the House, the Education Committee moved money around from every little place we could find it. We're not getting the kinds of revenue that we were getting before from the mineral extraction industry, so we have to be creative. So some of that money came out of the general fund, some of it came out of the so-called rainy day account, the legislative stabilization reserve account. We managed to get some money moved from, sometimes we need to really take a look at our whole funding mechanism for the state of Wyoming. It's very complicated. If I could diagram it, it'd probably cover most of this wall right up here. But we did discover some money that was being put into an environment fund that wasn't mandated that it went in there. And so we were able to divert that money. And so it was a combination of a whole bunch of different sources of revenue that we combined to come up with enough money to do that. Now, whether we can continue to do it or not, I'm not sure. I think the online sales, now that we're able to collect those, I think that's going to be a really good source of revenue for the state of Wyoming, and certainly it's going to help our educational funding process.
Is education adequately funded? And the "ly" and funded on there, because I was thinking about the word adequate. What does adequate mean? And Ken wants a comprehensive answer. It's adequate. It's mandated by state law. It has to be adequate. Mandated by a few Supreme Court decisions out of the 90s, as Mr. Paxton referred to out of Campbell County. It has to be adequate. They actually sued because they weren't getting enough of their raises every year when cost of living was going up. Is it adequate? Yes. Is it perfect? No. It's not perfect. There's no such thing as perfect. Is it as good as it could be? No. I don't think it is. Many different districts, not a total of 5 because you'd have to take Rollins out, which I believe is another district, so that'd make 4 and 47, not 5. And each one is a different budget, and each one is a different basket of goods. And a lot of those baskets of goods are your technical schools, your technical classes, your home economics, your living development classes, if you would allow me to call them that. Not everyone needs to go to college to get a job, but maybe there's some wrench turners, some mechanics, some welders, some people going into construction out there. Are we funding that as well as we could in our schools in Wyoming? Probably not as well as we absolutely could. Is it adequate? I believe it's adequate. But I believe we got to keep an eye on it. I don't believe that means we just need to raise taxes if we end up with a shortfall. I don't believe that means that we just have to look at everybody else in the state and say, you're going to pay this percentage more because we're a little short and we don't have enough in rainy day, we don't have enough in general, we got to find it from somewhere. Is it adequate? Yes, it's adequate. Is it perfect? No. Could it be improved? I think it could be improved some. One thing I've learned from talking with current educators, current administrators, current lobbyists is they all feel as if a little bit of money or a chunk of money is being wasted on administration. There's some waste there. There's a little too much administration going on in certain aspects in certain places that could be perfected on, and those funds can maybe be diverted to another class, another source, some other set of resources for students that could be utilizing those. So I do believe it's adequate, but adequate's kind of a bit of a vague word. I think it could be improved upon.
Can I do a quick follow-up on that? Absolutely, you have the right to do a follow-up.
I think we need to keep in mind that, you know, we're a local control state, so that local school boards, once the money leaves the state, goes to the local school boards, they have a lot of discretion on how that money is spent. So district by district, there may be some inadequacies from that's brought about primarily by the school districts. We have a school district in the state of Wyoming that has chosen to pay their superintendent $205,000 a year plus benefits. And when we look at that as an education committee, you know, without micromanaging, how do we go about cutting back on that? And do we have too many administrators? Probably, but a lot of that is a local district control issue. So your local school board makes a lot of difference in how that money is allocated.
Thank you both. And I owe the candidates an apology. I've been trying to remember to make these signs for time and have forgotten. So I extend my apologies. All right. So the following question says, looking at the astronomical amount of tax revenue from Washington, California, and Colorado from marijuana sales, would you be in support of legalizing pot to benefit schools?
So specifically, looking at the amount of money in DC that has no functional recreational facilities or grow facilities whatsoever, so I don't know what tax money they're looking at. California, which has a very functional system. Colorado, which has a functional system. Would that tax money, would it benefit the state of Wyoming to legalize recreational marijuana to use the tax money for our schools? Just so I understand the question.
Yes, that is the question.
No. I'm gonna need a lot better reason than that. A lot than just the tax money for our schools. Tax money in general, very, very appealing. We didn't say medical, we said recreational. There's a big difference. I have a nursing degree. I work in nursing every single day. Is there medical use there? Yeah, I think there really is. Yeah, I'm gonna get in trouble for saying that. Yeah, I'm still gonna stand up here and tell you the truth. Is there strong ground that we absolutely have to have that tax money to pay for our school bills to legalize recreational? No. I don't see the evidence. If you have any that you'd love to show me, I'd be happy to look at it. But there better be a lot of it. I'm not going to justify a move of that caliber just alone on the tax revenue for our schools. That's not enough. That's nowhere near enough. There's a lot more data that's missing. There's a lot more information needs to be needed. And maybe that's not what a lot of you wanted to hear. Maybe that'll get me in a lot of trouble. That's fine. I'd rather stand up here and tell you the truth, tell you what I think, and be honest with you than blow smoke up here. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna disrespect each and every one of you that way.
Well, regardless of how I may feel about it personally, I think the people of Wyoming are probably not ready for legalization of marijuana. Certainly not people in House District 47. And as we move forward, I think that more and more states legalizing marijuana, I think the benefit's probably going to be reduced. It's like anything else. If you get in on the ground floor, you're going to do pretty well. And if you're a latecomer to the game, you probably won't do so well. And I think that one of the things that we don't hear a lot about, because of the amount of tax revenue that's generated from that, there's some impacts that come from that too. I've had some conversations with some people down in Colorado about, from the prosecutor's standpoint, about all the issues that come along about that. But we would be creating a whole new bureaucracy within the state. We did the simple little thing of providing farmers the opportunity to raise hemp. And we have not been able to do that so far because we have to establish a whole network of people within the Department of Agriculture to test that, to make sure that the THC level is within standards. And so we have no hemp growing in the state of Wyoming right now because we haven't been able to generate the bureaucracy that it would take to bring it about. So.
Okay, thank you both.
Oh, I don't know if I need a microphone.
Oh,
So along those similar lines, I would like to know, as far as the taxpayer money that goes to paying for the jailing and being in the prisons for people for minor pot offenses, how is that something that's serving the people of Wyoming to pay for that non-violent crime being jailed?
Okay, so if I understand the question correctly, you are asking about how fair is it to be using tax dollars to jail people for small minor crimes such as possession of marijuana?
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
Well, I would say that Wyoming's thinking on that is evolving right now, and as we see more and more marijuana being legalized around the country, I think there's been a different attitude and a shift of attitude. You know, change is an evolutionary process, not a revolutionary process. Sometimes it takes us a while to evolve to that, but decriminalizing the possession of small amounts of marijuana wouldn't be a problem for me.
I grew up in Milwaukee. Grew up with 3 strikes and you're out. Watched friends, and I'm not kidding, my best friend from high school serving a life sentence for shoplifting. I am fully for, oh yeah, I'm not kidding, I'll show you documents. I am fully for decriminalization of small amounts. I'm fully for decriminalization and not wasting money on marijuana when we have an opioid epidemic. Sorry, and we do. I've done enough chemistry to know what it does to you. It tears people apart, tears their brains apart. It's a lot worse than THC. I don't have a problem decriminalizing. I don't have a problem moving that direction. I don't think, and I'll agree with Mr. Pax on this, which semantics sometimes, but we don't agree on some things and a lot of things. It's past time to start decriminalizing. I think it has real medical use. I've seen it. I've seen it in cancer patients. I've seen it in ALS patients. I've seen cerebral palsy. I've seen it in seizure patients. Didn't say that. I just said that specifically for schooling funding, no, that's not enough. Should we be wasting money on that and the other things we may waste money on? 3 strikes and you're out, other big crimes? No. There's no reason America, all of us are here because we believe in it. You guys wouldn't be here on a Tuesday night past the tacos and a little bit of free wine if you didn't care about your country. We have way too many people in prison. It's ridiculous. We started rolling that way in the 90s, and you can look back at it if you want to. It's mostly Democrats that did it. It was a mistake. They know it was a mistake. They've admitted it was a mistake. We need to start going the other direction. I just said I don't think the Wyoming's ready to take on recreational. That's not a good idea for us right now. And it certainly isn't a good idea justified just through funding our schools. That's nowhere near enough. But yeah, I agree with you. It's a waste of money, and it's not just marijuana. That's the tip of the iceberg.
All right, do we have any other questions? Okay, so barring any other questions, I will thank the representatives for their time. So we also have in attendance some county candidates. We have Tom Gamblin, who is here for sheriff, and we have Travis Moore, who is here for commissioner. We will begin with Mr. Gamblin.
Right on, guys. Thanks for coming.
First of all, that was a lot to take in. I see you're out there drinking, feeling pretty good now. See, you're not taking it in now. So, my name's Tom Gamblin. I'm running for Carbon County Sheriff. I considered it 4 years ago. I defaulted away from that because a friend of mine was going to run, and he had some good points, some things that he felt that needed to be changed that we see personally. I am a resident of Wyoming, have been for 13 years. My wife, my beautiful wife Sonia, is here with me. I wouldn't be able to do this without her. My 7 children, they're not here, of course, but all of my to-be maybe in-law kids, you know, that show up as well. Wyoming's been good to me and my family. We moved here from California. I've lived all over the world. Lived in Spain for 3 years. Spoke Spanish. Had a little trouble speaking English when I came back to the States. I was young enough that I took it up pretty well. Lived in Italy for 2 years. I've lived in 7 states. I've been in probably the majority of them across our land. I'm proud to say that I'm an American, and I know what it means to be that because I've seen the other side of it, where they don't have the same rights that we have. They don't sit around and have these kinds of conversations. They don't have these kinds of meetings, but we do. And it's the best part of what we do is it brings us all together so that we can make the decisions regarding our own areas. So on that note, I had a whole list of things I was going to share, but my opponents didn't show up, so I'm just going to throw it out there. Wife and kids, we lived here for 13 years. We've made this our home. My daughters, my sons have made their way through high schools. They've made their way through college. I have a daughter in Jackson, actually Star Valley. She works in Jackson. She's an attorney there as a result of the education system here in this state. My children are a product of public education that's really great in this area. I mean, do we have some things we need to work on? Yes, absolutely. That's what I'm here for. We have some things that we need to work on. I'm not going to get up here and bash any other sheriff. I'm not going to bash the other opponents that are running against me. What I'm going to tell you is what I'm standing for. I brought up with me a small list of the things that I want to change. New vision, new direction. We've got to make some changes in the county. There's some things that we have to do, in particular to your area. You don't see officers in this area. I mean, when you see them, they're driving by a bus stop. Because, listen, no fault to those officers, to those deputies. They're short-handed. They're moved to other places. Hannah, Medicine Bow, and Elk Mountain have no living officer, no deputies in their area. They have 2 marshals. And then they have highway patrol. I won't go into the numbers, but all the other areas, the cities and municipalities in our county have officers living in their areas. These areas have a hard time keeping them. I understand that. But you got to come up. You have to use your imagination, and you have to come up with a plan of how you're going to meet that need. And my question is, why wasn't that plan made a long time ago? Why do you, as the county residents, taxpayers of this county, are willing to just stand by and say, well, you know, we'll get one sooner or later? You ought to be standing up and saying, hey, let's get something now. Let's come up with a plan, an idea to get officers in our area. Why don't we have officers in Medicine Bow, Hannah, and Elk Mountain? Why isn't there a deputy there? He just lost one at the end of the month. He finished his tour, and in conversations with him, he said, you know, Tom, he said, that this area is the highest call volume we have in the county, but there are no officers here. I'm the only guy doing the job. It's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job, and I just can't do it. Not able to be done.
In Riverside are exactly the same. Yes.
Exactly.
We don't have representation at all.
So one of the things that I want to change is I want to give you some representation. I want to move some people around. I want to come up with some better ideas. Paper service, we're paying guys $20+ an hour to deliver paperwork. When that could be done with a little bit of imagination, a little bit of movement on the judges and on our court system, we can move people around and we can hire veterans and retired officers to deliver paperwork that don't get paid $24, $25 an hour, because all they need is 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week. So those are some of the ideas that I had. Now, I've said them and they're being recorded, so now my opponent's going to go, hey, that's a good idea. I think I'll do that. Because that's something that needs to be done. You've got to think outside the box in order to make things work. And that's where I'm coming from, making things work. How about in patrol vehicles? Why is it that Rollins Police Department, and I worked for Rollins Police Department half for 13 years. I worked for other agencies before coming here. Why is it that the county doesn't have the types of equipment and technology in the vehicle that the small town of Rollins has? Why can't we get that in the vehicles? How about to save times for arrestees that have come from when they arrest somebody in these areas, Riverside, Encampment, Hannah, Medicine Bow, Elk Mountain? Why is it that an officer has to drive all the way into the county jail, drop him off, do his paperwork, and then come back out? He's gone for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Sometimes response times to those areas while he's gone are 2 hours. And I will tell you firsthand, I've heard it myself. I've listened to my radio while I'm working in Rollins. I'll hear a call in one of your areas, and it's 45 minutes, an hour and a half, 2 hours before an officer can get here. Because you don't have anybody here on their days off.
Because Rollins has all the votes.
Rollins has all the votes. So folks.
I'll let you finish. We have a question.
Yes, sir. So that's one of the things we want to remedy. Technology in the vehicles. I can do my paperwork in my vehicle long before I get to the jail. I can do my paperwork. I can have all the information I need. I can have that paperwork done. Deputies who are in outlying areas of our county can have their paperwork done here. Why not have them do their paperwork in the area where they're from? Hit print. It prints at the jail. We worked out some way to get this an e-signature on that, so we get the judges to accept it. We get the courts to accept it. I mean, listen, folks, it's not something we do now, but it's something we have to do. We didn't use computers before, but it's all we use now. Everything we do. So we got to come up with a plan for those kinds of things. Have that deputy stay in the area. Have a jailer who's not doing anything. Now, this is no reflect on that they're lazy. What I'm saying is they have some downtimes as well. When they do, have them come out to the rural areas, pick up the arrestee, take him back to the jail. That deputy didn't have to leave your area at all. He's here the whole time. So if you have a need, if you have a call, listen, folks, it comes back to this. This is the basic principle and truth. Here it is. When you dial 911, what do you expect?
A response.
You expect a response in a reasonable amount of time, a deputy standing on your doorstep saying, how can I help you and what do we need to do? That's what you expect. So we've gone away from decorum here, I think. So listen, folks, what we're trying to do is make sure that we are trying to make sure that we get the outlying areas of people that don't have representation. That's just one of it. I've got a whole list of things. I'll go on. Sorry.
Okay, Mr. Gamblin. So, question received. How are you going to deal with all the speeding trucks coming up from Colorado through Riverside?
I got an answer. You ready? I got an answer. How many here have been to Centennial? Come on, everybody raise your hand, right? So you've been to Centennial. What's the first thing you see when you go into Centennial from this side? A little bitty police car. It's got a fake cardboard top in it and a cherry on top. That thing was put there back in 1962, right? I mean, it doesn't even look right. But what's the first thing you do when you roll around the corner and you see that car? Oh, shoot! Went all over there. Wow, there's a cop there. You slam the brakes on, you slow down. What do you do for the next minute and a half while you're driving through Centennial? You laugh a little bit and you're going slow. Presence is proactive. Presence. You put somebody out here that's on those roads where they're flying through here, and I guarantee you pull some of those guys over and you give them some of the tickets that we issue in this county, I guarantee you that news is going to get around. And those guys are guys that pass through here a lot. They're not just one time. They come through here regular. They're coming to work. So 5 times a day, they see an officer sitting on that roadway. You do that for a short time, and I guarantee you that that would slow down the people driving through your county, driving on your roadways as fast as they're driving and causing the problems that they're causing. That's a reality. That's the truth. That's what I do for a living, folks. That's what I do. I can tell you this, and I'll finish up this question. I sit out in certain areas. I have a name for myself, you know, and they have names for me too, but I won't say those. I will sit in certain areas. I want them to know where I'm at. I want them, because these are areas of concern. I want them to know I'm sitting there, because when they come to that area where we have children crossing over into education areas, they're going from residences to their riding their bicycles, walking themselves. They don't all ride the bus. So I sit in those areas specifically because I want them to know, hey man, don't go around the corner. Today is Wednesday, and you know who's working today. And if you go around that corner too fast, if you go flying through that area, you're going to get a ticket. You don't have to give a ticket all the time, and you don't. Let me just say this: before deciding to do this, I started to say who it was. I spoke to a former employee that worked as an administrator for your county sheriff's department. And this was his advice to me when I said, hey, what do you think I should do? What are your ideas? He said, well, Tom, first of all, I'm going to tell you, they don't want cops out in the outer areas in the county. I said, really? He said, no. They don't want the whole Nazi police officer type stuff that they go on in Rollins. They don't want that in the county. I said, well, I can see that. He said, they don't want officers out there because that would have an effect on the things that they do every day. I said, well, what are you talking about? I said, because the people I've spoken to have said they want officers out in their areas. They want to see deputies driving around their areas. It's a good point. If you have representation, if you elect me as your sheriff, if this town will join with the others that I have that are voting for me, I'm working on changing some things around here, folks. We're going to move some stuff around, and we're going to make some differences. We're going to show up in your town, and we're going to be here for the duration. We're not going to go anywhere unless we just have an emergency. We've got to move somewhere for a short time, and we're coming back. Does that make sense? I hope I've answered your question. Any other questions?
Do we have any other questions?
So how do you solve the problem of the 45 to an hour and a half response time?
All right, so let's base that on the model that we have right now. We don't have officers. I'll use your area and their area. You're down officers. They're down officers as well. Fact of the matter is they don't have any. So what do? You just leave it empty, and then when somebody comes in, you ship them over there. You have no representation. First of all, the sheriff's department gives no representation between the hours of 12 and 8 in the morning. You do not have an active deputy driving around. He has to be called out. I heard a call the other night that took well over an hour for the officer to get out of bed, get in their truck, drive all the way over to where the call was, and then eventually get to it. So how do you deal with that? We have properties. The county has properties in every area of our county. We own property. There are areas where we can make living quarters. Now, listen, I understand we're fighting the budgets. I get that. And then we're fighting county commissioners who are saying we don't have enough money. Well, we need to come up with the money somewhere. We've got to come up with something to make this work because people feel left out. So what do? You rotate people that are officers in other areas, which they have done in the past, but it's only a temporary thing, and it doesn't work out to the longevity of the problem. So what do? You take an officer, you say you're going to be over here, you're going to move in this, you're going to work in this different district for 2 days. You're going to get paid comp time, or you're going to get paid, time for being over, staying the night over in the area, away from your family. We're going to pay you for that. We're not going to pay you an hourly every hour the same amount you make when you're working, but while you're sleeping and while you're down and while you're over in the area, we're going to an on-call pay if you don't know. And then during the day shift, they get up, they go work in that area and stay there. That's one way to make that work. The other is to reduce the numbers in the bigger cities that have larger representations that don't have the call load that you folks out here in the outer line areas have. Reduce those numbers by 1 or 2 by producing a paper service, a bonded citizens paper service to go out and take those subpoenas and all the paperwork that the county moves around and move those people to outer line areas until you find someone to live and be in that area just like where they belong. Does that make sense? That's one small way of doing it. I mean, are all those things, did the answer right away? I think so, especially right now when we Listen, drug trafficking, drugs, somebody said it earlier, drugs, in fact, I've heard 3 or 4 of the representatives say this. We have a problem in Carbon County with drugs. My wife and I are foster care parents. We have been for many years. We have taken in more children than I'd like to say. We have had, I dare say, upwards of 50 kids in the last couple of years that go through our home. I'm not giving names or no secrets. We are good foster parents, but we recognize that there's a problem in our county because most of those parents that we have to take their children from, my wife will tell you that we had 2 children for 2 years because the parents couldn't get clean because there's no resolution, no resolve for parents who have addictions. And we've got to come up with a plan. Children shouldn't be living away from their parents and in the homes of people they don't know. Now, don't get me wrong, my wife and I love those children immensely, and we're ready to give them back when it's time to go back. I have no false intentions or no intentions to keep children. I got 7 of my own, 2 we've adopted. You know, we have a lot of children, we love them, and we love the kids that come to us. But we have a drug problem in Wyoming and in Carbon County. Somebody said prescription drugs, methamphetamine. Never in my life did I ever think that heroin would ever make a comeback from the 60s and 70s that we saw in the numbers. We've superseded that now in our nation. How many of you know we have a heroin problem in our county? We have a huge heroin problem. But who would have ever thought that it would ever come back? But it has. And we have got to do something about that. Putting people out on the road, officers that are proactive, that is part of the answer. And we're not talking small amounts of marijuana and arresting somebody for a small bag that they have in their pocket. We're talking about heroin, methamphetamine, prescription drugs that are being floated because you can't get them in Rollins anymore from just certain doctors that want to hand them out. You have to go to specific individuals. You know, so what do? They traffic that stuff through your county, your town, my town, my town. And I want to do something about that. Drug task force, why can't we start something like that? I want to bring unity between all of our small towns and our officers and our different departments that we have. Let's put them all together. Let's come up with some good ideas. Let's work together in our county instead of all these small little agencies doing their own little thing and nobody wants to cooperate. Nobody wants to go to the same kind of training. You want to cut training costs down? Do it with the whole county. Do it with everybody in the county, as many officers as you can. And I've done that personally. Even in Rollins Police Department, I do some of the training. And some of that I've actually taken on my own, and we've invited agencies outside of our agency to come in and join with us, which we have done for years, and other departments as well. But let's get us all on the same page. Let's get unity in our county, and let's attack the drug problem that we have as well.
Okay, anybody else have a question for Mr. Gamble? Okay, so seeing as we are now 9:15, thank you all for staying. You have. I'll thank Mr. Gamble for his time. And I will bring on the stage Mr. Travis Moore. Thank you for staying.
Everybody still awake? Yeah. My name actually is Robert Travis Moore. I'm from Rollins, 4th generation Carbon County, but I've never gone by my first name. And I blame my parents for that. So now I go with the first initial and then my middle name, and I've been Travis Moore my whole life. But I know if you call me Robert Moore or Travis Moore, you either work for the federal government or you're a telemarketer. The last time I spent a considerable amount of time in the bear trap, it was during fire. I did 13 years as a wildland firefighter, spent some time up on Black Hall. During my second stint with the BLM, I spent some more time on Bear Mountain South out here. And one thing I must say about all the communities in Carbon County, this one, since I'm here, I'll tell this story. The community of Encampment and Riverside embraced us. They washed our clothes. They fed us. They paid us with hugs. They gave us brownies and extra water when it was cold because we were drinking warm water because that's all we had. We slept on the football field, but every community in Carbon County does those types of things, and I'm here to represent the people. I'm a big policy guy, But the biggest resource we have in Carbon County is its people. I listen to a lot of people as a professional educator. I've been in education, dabbled a little bit starting in 1995, got hired on, I'll be starting my 20th year this year. I've been in administration for 7, and I wised up and started teaching a little bit again, but I still do the administrative stuff because that's just the way it goes when you get those degrees. They want you to do those things. I am currently studying so I can also teach college level courses because there was a need in our community. Our town lost a lot of things and our kids were only able to take online courses, and I had enough. And they said, well, what are you going to do about it? Well, I went back to school. So if I complained about the county to my wife, she says, what are you going to do about it? Well, I should run for office. And she said, okay, it's time. So here I am. The 3 biggest things for a county commissioner, as I've seen it, and I'm no expert by any means, is for the health, safety, and welfare of its people. And that's the bottom line that I will bring up every single time. Mr. Gamblin talked about it. They talked about it in terms of education. All the other people gave that stuff. I know that he brought up law enforcement, but that also concerns fire, EMS, the communication systems for all those things. How is it run through the dispatch centers? I'm interested in all of it, and I'm a systems guy. I want to build systems within the county so that it won't rest upon the shoulders of one individual, because we all know in the boom-bust economy, people leave. People retire. People do other things. I've seen it in education. I've seen it in law enforcement. I've seen it in the state government. I've seen it at the federal government in the local offices, both in Saratoga and in Rollins. They build the programs, and when the person leaves, the programs die. We need systems in place that other people can assume and learn and continue. And we haven't seen that a lot in Carbon County government. You've seen what happens with turnover on all the boards. You get some turnover on the library board, what happens? You get some turnover on the hospital board, what happens? Is there a system of training in place to help those people who are appointed to do a better job? Just like Officer Gamblin talked about up here earlier, we need training, and we need to consolidate that training countywide. Human resource management, leadership, dealing with people tactfully, because we are servants of the people. I believe in that wholly. And if I was to do it all again, I wouldn't change much at all. You know, as much as I discouraged my son to do the dangerous job of wildland firefighting, he trumped me and joined the same crew that I was on and wants to move into helicopter and aviation, which scares the bejesus out of me, but I did it, so can he. My students, over the years, I've encouraged them to move on and do better things, but we do have a problem in Carbon County, as we do as Wyoming as a whole, with brain drain. Some of the other candidates talked about it. But if we're going to bolster the people, we have to have something to offer for our young people to stay here. They have to be able to stay here and to contribute to our economy, to our neighborhoods, and to our growing family. I believe that Wyoming is just one big small town with long streets, and I have no problem whatsoever, and I never have, talking to strangers, collaborating with people that I disagree with, and if they disagree with me, I spent a lot of time talking to Jerry Paxton. I spent a lot of time talking to Larry Hicks about education because I'm an educator. And we've gone round and round and round, but we were willing to sit down and talk about it. They invited me to committee meetings. They wanted to sit down and talk, but we have to have people that are willing to do that at the municipality level, at the county level, at the state level, and also somebody that can also talk to the federal government and big time companies that bring their money here. I'm willing to do those things, and I would appreciate your vote on August 21st.
Okay, do we have any questions for Mr. Moore?
Fantastic. I was hoping for the Common Core Standards one. I have something in my pocket for that one.
Okay, somebody who used to follow county commissioners, they are very busy. And they go to a lot of meetings and they have to know a lot of stuff. How are you going to balance being an administrator and a Carbon County commissioner?
I haven't had a single year in education where I didn't wear many hats. When I started out in education, I was teaching full-time, I was coaching 3 sports or activities, and I was trying to get into graduate school and to do that kind of stuff. I'm finally starting to finish those things up. I'll finish another degree in December, and then another one the year after from the University of Wyoming. But I have a fantastic supervisor at the current time, and we've already talked about the meetings and the other things that I need to attend, and he's more than willing to let me go. However, let me add this piece. Because my duty also is to the young and the youth of our county. In my school, me being gone for an afternoon makes a difference. I am the principal and part-time English teacher of the Cooperative Alternative High School in Rawlins. So when I'm gone, that's a substitute for those kids. So I take that very seriously. So those things, I'm not a fan of meeting to meet, but I will go to the Council of Governments. I will go to all the meetings that they have and any committee shifts that I'm appointed to make sure that I serve those interests also. But Mr. Hamill, the superintendent, Carbon County School District 1, already gave me the green light and supports me, so.
Anybody else? Okay. I think for your
Nothing
time.
about hemp, no, no education, constitution questions.
I tried saving the best for last, and this is what happens.
Okay.
So I thank you for your time, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, and thanks, Margaret, for having us down here. This is wonderful.